It really feels like the world is at some kind of crossroads, doesn't it? Well, in the middle of all this turbulence, China has put a pretty bold proposal on the table to reshape how the world is run. So what exactly is this global governance initiative? Let's dive in and break down the vision behind it and, what it could all mean for our future. To really get our heads around this proposal, we first have to understand the problem it's trying to solve. And the source material paints a really stark picture here. It talks about a world facing a massive trust deficit and claims we're shifting away from the rule of law and towards the rule of the jungle. Now that's a heck of a statement, and it's the whole reason this new initiative is even being discussed. So what are these so-called problems exactly? Well, according to the source, there are 3 fundamental flaws, or deficiencies, in our current global system that are really driving this whole call for change. Okay, so let's break these down. First up, there's underrepresentation. The argument here is that the global south, the developing nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, they just don't have a fair say in how things are run. Second is this idea of eroding authority. The claim is that the core principles of the UN Charter, basically the foundation of international law, are being ignored. And third, a simple lack of effectiveness. We're falling behind on big goals, and we're totally scrambling to create rules for new frontiers like AI and cyberspace. The system, as it's argued, just isn't keeping up. So, in response to all of these perceived failings, China has put its own solution forward. And this is the real heart of our explainer today, the Global Governance Initiative, or GGI for short. So what is the GGI, really? At its core, it's presented as this vision for a world that's more just, more equitable, and multipolar, meaning a world where power isn't just concentrated in one place. And the ultimate goal? To build what the source calls a community with a shared future for humanity. But the GGI didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's really the latest piece of a bigger puzzle. As you can see from this timeline, it follows these other major proposals on development, security, and civilization. This suggests that the GGI is meant to be the capstone, the final piece of a much larger strategic vision. Now, this slide gets to a really crucial point from the source. The GGI isn't being sold as some kind of revolution to tear the whole system down. The analogy they use is that it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's more about making adjustments, fine-tuning the existing machinery so it can actually handle the challenges we're facing today. Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this proposal. How does it actually plan to fine-tune the system? Well, the whole initiative is built on 5 core pillars. Let's walk through them one by one. First, sovereign equality. The idea is every country, big or small, rich or poor, gets an equal seat at the table. Second, international law, but very specifically defined as the principles of the UN Charter. Third, true multilateralism. This means global decisions should be made by everybody, not just a few powerful countries. Fourth, a people-centered approach. Governance should actually make people's lives better. And finally, number 5, a focus on concrete actions, instead of just talk, to solve real-world problems. Now, this next point is really interesting because it's all about the language being used. The initiative is being positioned as a direct answer to something the source calls pseudo-multilateralism. That's a really critical term, and it seems to be aimed at these exclusive alliances or small circles that, it's argued, actually get in the way of real global cooperation. Okay, so if these small circles are the problem, what's the solution? Well, the GGI argues for putting the United Nations back at the center of everything. The goal is to strengthen the UN's role as the main platform for global cooperation and to move away from these exclusive clubs and back toward a universal system. All right, let's play this out for a minute. If this initiative were to actually gain some traction, what would really change? What could the world potentially look like? The source points to 3 pretty big potential outcomes. First, we could see a major restructuring of institutions like the UN to better reflect the world's diversity. Second, you could see much deeper cooperation and innovation among the nations of the global south. And third, a real pushback against unilateral policies, where one country just goes it alone in a way that can really mess with global stability. But of course, it's never that simple, is it? Proposing a plan this huge is one thing, but actually making it happen is a whole different ballgame. The road ahead is filled with challenges, and the source itself points out some major ones. So, the source highlights 3 key hurdles.
First, resistance. Some Western powers might see this whole thing as a direct threat to their historical influence. Second, disunity. I mean, the developing countries themselves have a lot of different interests, which could make it really tough to form one unified front for reform. And finally, just plain distrust. It's pretty likely that strategic rivals will be suspicious of the real intentions behind this whole initiative.
So, when you strip everything else away, what is this initiative really all about? Well, according to the source, it's an attempt to break the logjam, the inertia that has basically paralyzed the international system. It's a call to start a serious global conversation about where we all go from here. And that brings us to the final, really powerful question that the source leaves us with. Can the world's nations actually move beyond a logic of dominance and toward a true, fair partnership that can shape a shared future for all of us? That question is really at the very heart of this whole debate, and it's something for all of us to think about.